This is the Data Privacy Detective. Today we're going to talk about global data privacy statements. How do you draft one? Is one even possible? Think about it for a minute. There are about 200 countries in the world. There are states within countries, provinces, departments. There are a lot of privacy laws having to do with people, individual rights to privacy if they exist, that are just different around the world. So how does any organization, it could be a business, a university, how does it deal with this when it has cross-border involvement? Universities have foreign students, publishers publish books around the world, law firms, accounting firms, businesses have global clients. How do you deal with this when an organization is dealing cross-border and tries as best it can to comply with evolving and changing and differing laws about personal data privacy? That's what we're going to talk about today. And I've looked at a lot of privacy statements. You see them posted on websites. Oh, let's face it, most of us don't read them if we want to use an organization. We don't spend time going through it. So this is not how to read one if you're an individual wondering about it. This is if you're an organization that is trying to be privacy compliant globally, how do you write something that says, here's how we do this? That's what we're going to talk about. So let's jump right into it. First of all, you might think about starting with a cookie advertisement posting that says, cookies, here's how we deal with them. Do you refuse all cookies, or do you accept all, or do you want to customize yours? Now, these are popping up because they're legally required in a lot of ways. And cookies probably ought to be one of your first things that pops up, and it respects an individual's right to be able to change how any company or organization uses their personal data. Next point, they're called privacy statements. Well, they're not really statements about all aspects of privacy. They're really about data privacy, and more specifically, personal information or personally identifiable information that is in the form of data that is transmitted over the internet. So instead of just privacy statement, you can call it that for the label, but it's really a personal data privacy statement. Okay, and the next thing is it ought to have a date on it for when it's issued, and you're going to want to update this from time to time, so post that. And so how do you start it out? Well, I'd suggest starting about the organization. We, the company, the university, whatever it is, are committed, you should say, to safeguarding privacy and personal data as best you can on a global basis. And you should state there's some exceptions. Let's say that an organization uses a data room, or e-discovery if it's a law firm, or tax filings if it's an accounting. There's some exceptions to this, and because after all, a lot of information can come into an organization that it really doesn't want or need necessarily, or just needs for a one-off. So talk about that. And then you ought to say that the statement is intended to inform basically people with whom an organization has contacts, and I'll say does business, and prospective clients, customers, contacts. But it probably should not say that it covers people within the organization, because those matters are going to be dealt with as HR matters, as contractual agreements that people have with their employees inside the company about how their personal data will be treated. So a privacy statement posted on a website typically isn't for the internal purpose, it's for the external purpose. Clients, customers, browsers, people who interact with a global business or organization. Then you can mention that the organization has offices around the world, or in 5 countries, and is expanding, or whatever the situation is, and make sure that As the company expands internationally in the people with whom it interacts, that it's going to let them get in touch with somebody if they have a question. And so I'd start there, not leave it to the end for how do we get contacted. All right, so you have this preliminary paragraph or two or three that talks about that. Next, tell in the privacy, the personal data privacy statement, when, how, and what personal data is going to be collected. And I use the word collected. We're going to get to processing later. But in collecting, that you should state that all personal data that's going to be processed by an organization is that which is needed to fulfill the purposes for which it's being collected. You're not trying to data maximize. You're trying to collect only the data about has any personal aspect to it that is really needed to carry out the purpose of the organization. You can then talk about the processing of personal data is going to happen in a whole variety of ways, recordings and automated means and disclosures and so on and so forth. And that there are going to be third parties that you use, whether it's Microsoft Word or somebody else who's external to you, that help the organization to do what it needs to do to process information for its organizational purpose. And so you should mention that. And you can collect what you say you're going to collect in the way of personal information. And that this can be collected from many different organizations. You may end up with personal data from another entity that has personal information in it, and that's going to be used to carry out the organization's purpose as you're outlining it. And then you might want to, I think you should, really specify that this is done in different ways. First, there's online data. And you can tell people they're not required to provide any personal data just to look at your website. But if you choose to contact us through the website, then you're going to be providing some information so we can get back to you, maybe a telephone number or an email or this sort of thing. And so that's what's going to happen. And so by doing that, they're basically allowing the use of that information for the contact purpose. Now, if you're going to use an organization's website for just information purposes, they tell them what you're going to do. You may collect their IP address, the date and time of their visit, this kind of thing. Tell them what you're going to do. And then if you're an organization that has newsletters or updates or catalogs or whatever it may be, tell the person that is applying that when you register for one of those, we're going to use your information to update you about things of interest to you. Cookies, even though you may have started out by doing that, mention that you do use cookies and similar technologies. Cookies may be going out as a way of describing them over time to collect, process information. Pursuant to a cookie policy. You may want a separate cookie policy. I'm not sure that's required if you do what we talked about earlier. And then during the course of a business or organization involvement with someone, of course, more would be collected. And when you're providing services to somebody, you may well collect personal data that goes far beyond the initial state. In fact, you will, no question about it. But online isn't the only thing. You can say and should in your privacy statement that if you visit the company, if you shop in a store, you visit the campus of a university, whatever it may be, that in-person things will happen too. That you may, it depends what you're doing. You may collect photographs of people. Now, whether you use them is a separate thing, but tell them that you may be photographed to gain entry to a secure facility, for example. So talk about the in-person collection and use of information that may occur. Closed circuit television, that's been a sleeping dog. You don't see this referred to much in privacy statements, but really good ones have this. The closed circuit TV cameras may be in operation on the firm's premises, and especially if it's an organization that requires security to get in and out of the premises that organizations use, and many do, of course. Next section, why is personal data used by your company? Well, tell them. There are a whole list of things you should mention. For example, to know your customer, not only because you want to know your customer as a business, but you're required to for money laundering, criminal defense by government, and so on. And it's beyond just saying, of course, we'll comply with laws. Tell them you may have to do that to create a client relationship. You're an accounting firm or a law firm, or providing services to global companies and people that are requesting your help. But to do other things, to training, seminars, webinars, client relationships, keeping a contact database accurate and up to date. So list the things where you're telling somebody how you're going to use their data. Now, next point, and this slips into the legal aspect of this, talk about lawful basis for collecting, processing, and storing information, and tell everyone that you're going to process personal data that comes in when there's a lawful basis to do so, and when the processing of information is necessary. It could be to perform a contract that's entered into. It could be to comply with the legal obligation you have to any country or state or province in the world. It could be for your or somebody else's legitimate interests that are not overridden by a data subject's interests or fundamental rights, such as someone applying for a job. You have a right to collect information to find out about them, even though they may not want you to look into their background. There are a lot of things. This is the part of the statement where you ought to explain that you do have lawful bases for looking into someone's personal information and to collecting it and to dealing with it that may go beyond what the individual wants you to do with it. And then, with whom are you going to share or sell personal information that's collected? Now, if you're not going to sell personal data, that's not part of your business model, say so. And just tell them, we do not sell personal data to third parties, nor have we done so in the last 12 months or whatever period of time you can be certain. Now, never make a misstatement. If you've done that, you better be prospective about changing your behavior. But if it's part of your business model, you should tell them that you do sell that. Now, you may sell their information, but if not, say so, and that'll obviously be of interest to people. And then, how about sharing, which is different from selling information? There are a lot of reasons that any organization dealing globally may need to disclose personal data and commercial information that's been shared for a business purpose. Certainly with third-party service providers, that could include a whole range of people: word processing, couriers, regulatory bodies, credit institutions, translators, contractors you have that help you deal with things. So talk about that. That's tailored to your business, what you have a right to do, and saying we do share your information to some extent with third parties in order to carry out your business. Next, talk about the consequences if a failure to provide your personal data. In other words, if somebody says, okay, I want to do business with you, I want information from you, I want to explore a relationship, but I'm not going to let you know anything about me. Well, you have a right to say, well, sorry, then we can't do business. And so you should tell them any refusal to provide certain data may prevent you, the organization, from providing services or goods to someone. You should talk about retention. Now, retention schedules can differ greatly among what types of data are kept and how long it needs to be kept, and so on and so forth. So in a personal data privacy statement, you can't be too specific about this. I wouldn't suggest saying, well, we keep this for 6 months and that for 2 years and this sort of thing. But you should tell people that you'll retain personal data for as long as needed to fulfill the purpose for which it was collected, and in order to comply with laws that may exist in any country that has a valid reason to demand retention of information about their residents or their citizens, or someone else who's doing something within a country. And you should, I think, tell them about closed caption TV images and how long they may be obtained and kept. About them, and will be erased, and what the retention is, all that sort of thing. Be careful about how that's worded, because here you may well have to comply with things in a country that you don't really expect, or that just changed its laws last month, and you don't want to be updating your privacy statement every week. That wouldn't make any sense. Next, state whether personal information is going to be transferred internationally. Now, this is one of the challenging things about international business. Some countries restrict what they consider an export of personal information of their residents. And there's not much you can do about it except try best you can to comply with that as an organization. And in the privacy statement, you have to talk to people about that. You may have people who have dual citizenship, or on a visa plan in your country, but they're a citizen of another country where the laws may differ. So there are a lot of issues here, and certainly with the European Economic Area, the EEA, or the United Kingdom, you have particular what we would call GDPR issues, and there you ought to say that personal data may be exported from there. For example, if your word processing takes place in the United States. Now, you may want to enter a form of safe harbor, if one really exists, between call it the EU or the EEAA and the UK and the United States. But you may instead want to say that you will adopt and you will abide by contractual arrangements that incorporate the European Commission's standard contractual clauses. And then on top of that, you may want to enter into a safe harbor. Next, tell people what rights they have. Now, realize that it may be a company that's approaching you, but it may then be providing personal information about the company's employees or contact people. And there you want to talk about what rights individuals have, not just the company, to demand certain things. One is access. In other words, say that you'll have a right to ask what information we have about an individual that's personal. You would have a right to rectify it if we have your dress wrong or whatever the information is. You have a right to rectify it, to correct it, or to complete it. You may have a right. I'd be careful about saying you do have a right to have your personal data erased. And certainly you may need to keep it longer than they may want you to, if it's in sync with your privacy statement, as should have been described before this paragraph. And furthermore, your company in a particular country or state or province may be required to keep information for a particular length of time, and just say that. You can't possibly update every time every law changes about retention in this respect. So a general statement should be enough. Restrictions. Individuals may ask a company to limit the way in which an organization collecting it stores and processes personal data. And what restrictions apply here? Tell them how you're going to handle that. Individuals may object to the processing of their personal data that relate to a specific situation, and say that can be done, but that the organization collecting and processing data still needs to be able to pursue its legitimate interest once the information is collected. Portability is something you should mention, and individuals may ask that an organization sends personal data, the organization sends personal data to a successor entity or a data controller or somebody else for another reason. This is the portability concept. You should tell people how they may withdraw their consent to the continuing processing of information, whether that's possible and how to do it, while reserving your rights to retain information that you're either required to retain or that is consistent with your legitimate interests in processing. Now, a few other things. Automated individual decision-making and profiling. This is certainly an issue in the data privacy sector. You may want to say that you will not discriminate. You won't receive, that no individual will receive discriminatory treatment by your organization if they exercise their privacy rights. It's a little separate from profiling, but that your personal data either is or isn't subject to decisional processing, for example, generative AI, based on personal data that has been included. Now, for many organizations, you don't need to do that about your customers, your clients, and you can say, if true, certainly, that your personal data is not going to be subject to decisional process. It's based only on automated processing that would include profiling. You should certainly say that you will have a right to and will be making changes to your privacy statement over time. They're going to be posted on your website or otherwise, and invite them to check back periodically to see about updates or changes, which will take place when issued. And finally, tell them how any individual whose information is collected, processed, or stored by the organization can contact the organization and exercise its rights or make requests that may or may not be accepted, and give them a phone number of somebody, give them an address. Now, it doesn't have to be an individual name, shouldn't be. Perhaps you email data privacy at name of organization, toll-free number, say if it's in the United States or in another country, so provide the country code and so on, so that they can call a toll-free number for almost really any organization that's issuing such a statement should do that to be friendly. And you can also mention that if a data protection officer exists in a country where the global organization is doing business, that the individual is free to contact the firm's local data protection officer without promising that there is one in every country, because many countries don't require that. And many states don't require that, provinces and so on. So it may or may not be required. Now, that's a long checklist, but use it as a way to think through, if you want to be an increasingly global business open to people through your website and otherwise, to people around the world, on how to craft one that doesn't say that you're going to be updating it every day that a law changes in some country or some state, but basically that you're a privacy conscious company, that you welcome global business, and here's how you're going to deal with personal information that comes into your possession. With that checklist, you're on your way to having posted on your website and otherwise applied a personal data privacy statement. As always, I'll close this episode by reminding us all protecting your personal data privacy begins with you.